All right, so here's my overview. Down payment assistance is a component of the building blocks of buying a home, and we have to put together the layers. So the first layer of buying a home is what we call the base loan program. So the base loan program is going to be an FHA, VA, USDA, or conventional loan. And I'm going to talk about how that works and what each of those programs are here in a moment. But we add on top of that a down payment assistance program or two, and that's what helps cover your down payment and potentially your closing costs. We also sometimes add a seller credit. So that's something you would negotiate with the agent that's representing you, and it really has a lot to do with the seller and what their expectation is of selling the house for full price. Sometimes to get a seller credit, you actually offer more than the purchase price of the home and say, hey, Mr. Seller, I know you're selling your house for $350,000, but I'll give you $360,000 if you give me a $10,000 credit towards closing costs. So that's a really good way to negotiate where the seller still gets the $350,000 that they wanted, but you get the closing costs that you need. Now you might ask, John, how does that help me out if I'm paying more for the house and then they're giving me a closing cost credit? Because every dollar of that closing cost credit goes back towards your closing costs. And I am increasing your loan amount because I can loan you typically 97%, 96.5% of the purchase price. So that $10,000 increase meant I got to increase your loan amount by $9,650. And in turn, we put that $10,000 towards the closing costs. But we put all three of those together and we can come up with as little to no funds out of pocket to purchase a home. And I'm going to give you guys the breakdown of exactly how each of these programs work so that you know what components you need to successfully purchase a home. So the first thing I'll talk about is FHA. FHA is the most common loan program that people use when they're buying a first home and they have limited funds for down payment or closing costs. It doesn't mean it's the only program, but FHA is commonly used. And the first thing you got to be aware of with FHA is that there's income limits. So every county has different limits, but we cannot exceed the income limits for that county. So as we're doing an FHA loan, we just have to pay attention to the fact that we're not exceeding those limits for the loan amount. On top of that, FHA requires a 3.5% down payment. The entire down payment can be a gift. So if you've got a situation, and I mentioned it a little bit later, but Bank of Mom and Dad is the absolute best down payment assistance program that's out there, or Bank of Brother and Sister, or Rich Uncle, or whoever it happens to be. Hold on one second. All right, cool. So the bottom line is that any of these programs can provide you the ability to buy a home without using actual down payment assistance money by getting a gift from family. So that's a great option to be able to buy a home. So I'll continue here with talking about FHA. FHA allows almost all down payment assistance programs to be layered on top of the FHA program. So as I talked about in the first slide, it's building blocks, and FHA as a foundational building block is the most forgiving program. I jokingly say FHA stands for Family Help Appreciated. The reality is FHA is very, very forgiving in a lot of issues. FHA is forgiving when it comes to your credit score. It's forgiving when it comes to your lack of down payment funds. It's got a lot of components that are much more forgiving than some of the other programs, but you pay a cost for it. And so that's kind of a trade-off, and we'll talk a little bit more about that down the road. All right, the next program, the base building block, is a conventional loan. Now, a conventional loan, most people think, oh my gosh, you have to have a really big down payment to buy a home using conventional financing. That's really not true. Conventional loans actually allow for as little as 3% down if you're a first-time home buyer. So that's a great scenario to purchase a home and do a conventional loan. The deal with conventional loans is that they're super sensitive to your credit score. So if you don't have that great of a credit score, doing a conventional loan is going to be punishing to your interest rate, your fee, and your monthly payment. So I want to remind you guys that if you have questions and you're on the Zoom meeting, post it in Zoom chat. If you're on Facebook Live, post it in Facebook comments, and I'll get to the Facebook comments as well, because I want to have this as interactive as possible as I'm explaining all of these programs. So a conventional loan, again, the entire down payment can be a gift, and it's more restrictive on which down payment assistance programs it will allow. Now, I'm going to spend most of the time today talking about the three major down payment assistance programs, and those are the CalHFA program, the GSFA Platinum program, and the GSFA Open Door program. Conventional works with all of those programs, but here's the deal. The term conventional is really talking about two different programs, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and they have a little bit different rules between each of those programs. So when I'm talking about doing a conventional loan using down payment assistance, none of the programs use both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Some programs use one, some programs use the other. So just because you said, oh my gosh, this program is the best program for me based on the terms of the program, it's possible I'm going to say it's not the right option because of the guidelines of Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac that go along with it. So a lot of nuances behind the scenes that we've got to be aware of. And conventional has something called their Home Ready program. And Home Ready offers cheaper mortgage insurance. Mortgage insurance is the fee you pay for the fact that you didn't put 20% down. FHA loans have a fixed amount of mortgage insurance, but conventional loans, it varies. And a Home Ready product has an amazing few features, one of them being cheaper mortgage insurance. There's actually a very little known and little used feature. With Home Ready, we can actually count income from someone who's not on the loan. That only helps out a little bit, and I'm not going to spend the time today talking about it, but there's a trick that we can use. If you're just barely not qualified, I can use Home Ready. If there's somebody else that's been living with you consistently and is bringing in income, I can use some of their income without putting them on the loan, without pulling their credit to help push you over the hump in order to qualify for the mortgage. And Home Ready does not require you to be a first-time home buyer. Now, here's where I'm going to be the first to tell you these guidelines are conflicting. I'm going to talk about one program and I'm going to say you don't have to be a first-time home buyer. I'm going to talk about another program and I'm going to say, yeah, you do have to be a first-time home buyer. Just be aware that the guidelines are somewhat conflicting. What I'm trying to do is to dispel myths. When somebody says, John, I can't use down payment assistance because I'm not a first-time home buyer. That's not true. There are programs who can help you purchase even if you're not a first-time home buyer. There's two other base programs, and those are VA and USDA, and those programs are amazing because neither one of them require any down payment. So you don't even need down payment assistance to buy a home if you're using VA or USDA. VA will now allow us to finance the entire purchase price up to $1 million. The other thing is a lot of veterans say, oh my gosh, I already used my VA loan, I can't do it again. That's not true. You can use your VA again. There is no requirement that you only use your VA once. That's a myth that a lot of people misunderstand. VA also plays well with some down payment assistance programs. So we can use down payment assistance to pay the closing costs, because anytime you buy a home, you have your down payment and you have your closing costs. And closing costs are anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 on average. And when you use down payment assistance, they're even more expensive. So that's a piece we have to be aware of, is down payment assistance comes at a cost. If you are using down payment assistance, the fees are higher to get the loan. I'll talk more about that later, but just be aware that the normal fees are $10,000 to $15,000. With down payment assistance, they can be upwards of $15,000 to $20,000 worth of fees. Depends on the purchase price, depends on a lot of factors, but I don't want to scare you away by saying it's that much or too much, but I want to be clear, you're definitely paying more in fees when you're using down payment assistance than you are when you're not. So again, VA is a great option, especially because there's no monthly mortgage insurance fee. And the cool thing is we don't have to get any seller credits if we don't want to. There's a myth, urban legend, historical information that's no longer accurate. It used to be that whenever you did a VA loan, there are certain things the seller had to pay for. Well, in most cases, that isn't true anymore. So if you are a veteran and you're saying, hey, I don't want to use it because I know the seller has to pay some fees, there aren't requirements for the seller to pay those fees, or we can use a down payment assistance program to cover those fees. Just be aware, if you're a veteran, that you have to have a pest inspection and a clearance on the home. All right, the next program I want to talk about is USDA. Again, this is one of the 4 base programs we use in our recipe as we're building down payment assistance. We have to pick one of these 4 base programs. We've talked about FHA, we've talked about conventional, which is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We've talked about VA. Now we're going to spend a quick minute talking about USDA. USDA also 0 down payment. USDA has income and geographic restrictions. So you're probably thinking to yourself, John, USDA, isn't that the Department of Agriculture? What in the world do they have to do with buying a home? USDA is the Department of Agriculture, and USDA created this program for rural areas that are underserved to assist those rural communities in home ownership. The cool thing is that the definition of rural allows for a lot of areas even in our market. Now, you can't be in the middle of town, no matter what city you're in. If you're in a decent sized city in California, you're not going to qualify for USDA. So it's going to be smaller towns, it's going to be country property, that kind of thing. But there's some really, really good opportunities. Actually, I've got a better chart that goes through income limits, and I don't know, that one might have been left over for one of my old presentations. USDA, we can use down payment assistance to cover some of the closing costs, and the mortgage insurance on USDA is way, way cheaper than the mortgage insurance on an FHA loan. So if you can do a USDA loan, it's going to save you money. USDA charges 1% as an upfront fee for mortgage insurance. FHA charges 1.75. USDA charges 0.35% each year for mortgage insurance. FHA charges between 0.8 and 0.85%. So almost half of what you're going to pay up front and more than half off of what you pay each month on the mortgage insurance. That's what makes USDA less expensive than FHA if you can qualify. Now here's a breakdown of maps, okay? You can go to USDA's website and you can find this map and you can zoom in, you can find an exact property and see whether it qualifies. But the bottom line that we're looking at here is going up the I-80 corridor, Dixon is able to be covered for USDA. Davis and Woodland are not. Once you get into, and this is basically just a causeway, once you get into Sacramento, everything is the yellow or the orange or whatever color, that's yellowish, isn't it, kinda? That color is not eligible. So everything outside of that color is eligible. The corridor going down I-5 Highway 99, from Elk Grove, from Camera Road in Elk Grove going down all the way to Acampo Road in North Lodi is all considered USDA eligible. That means Galt is eligible for USDA. It's one of the bigger cities that actually still has USDA eligibility. Winters is USDA. I don't know if Winters is USDA, Michelle. I don't have the ability to pull up the map right now, or it's going to goof up my presentation. But I will get for you the USDA eligibility webpage. Shoot me an email and I'll get that for you and we can take a look. All right, so the bottom line is USDA is a phenomenal option. Here's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about some of these communities losing USDA eligibility. Here's what happened. I got a couple minutes for a story. I got a lot of information to cover, but I got a lot of stories, so I'm gonna have to put up with it. So USDA has come out with their maps every 10 years. Actually, technically they can update them every 5 years, but USDA updates their maps based upon the census. And the census numbers in 2000 were used to create the map you're looking at. In 2010, the census came out and cities like Galt were too big. They didn't qualify anymore for USDA, and in 2011, they were going to remove those cities from USDA eligibility. But everybody got upset because we were in the middle of the housing recovery at that time. We were at the bottom of the housing market, and everybody was freaking out because you can't take away USDA loans. And so everybody in those communities petitioned their congressman and their senator, and they won. And they ignored the 2010 census. Therefore, these maps are still based on the 2000 census. If you know anything about the Galt area, you know that it's exploded in basically 2001 through 2007. It completely doubled in size, I'm guessing. I have no idea how much it grew, but it grew a whole lot. And those communities are even bigger in 2020. So we are just finishing up the census time now. I expect next year that they're going to redo these maps. The question is everybody going to get upset and call their congressman again? And are they going to win the fight to keep the maps the way they are or not? I don't know. But if you're thinking of buying in an area that kind of seems too good to be true, like how in the world can you call this a rural community? Then I would be worried and try and make that purchase within the next year. Because, and by the way, there is a small chance they could make that change October 1st of this year, because USDA updates all of their rules. Their calendar year starts October 1st. So if they change a rule, the rule change comes into play on October 1st. If October 1st of 2020, no changes are made, then you got a hall pass for one more year. But I'm concerned about October 1st of 2021 and whether or not they're going to implement the changes to the map. Hope that helps. All right, here's my better breakdown of the USDA income eligibility. So Sacramento, Placer, El Dorado, and Yolo County. And by the way, I know I wrote Yolo in two places because on the chart that I pulled it from on USDA's website, it's got YOLO in both places. So I'm not sure if they split Yolo County in the middle or not. That's why I kind of put YOLO down here as well. So 99,250 is the most you can make for a 1 to 4 person family. If you're a 5 to 8 person family, it's $131,000. You can see the numbers here. I'm not going to go through all of them. What I will tell you is USDA is the only assistance program, I'll call it assistance, where they care about the income from people in the household, even if they're not on the loan. So if you live in a home and you make $95,000 in Sacramento area, you qualify for USDA. The problem is if your 19-year-old child lives there with you and they have a part-time job that makes $10,000, you no longer qualify. Even though the kid's not on the loan, even though the kid's not going to be an owner of the home, USDA counts all adult family members in the household, and whatever income they're bringing in is counted towards, not counted towards qualifying for the mortgage, but it is counted towards the most amount you can earn before you are disqualified for USDA. All right, so I'm going to switch now to down payment assistance. We talked about the 4 base loan programs, FHA, conventional, VA, and USDA. The next layer is the down payment assistance. Remember, FHA requires 3.5% down. USDA or conventional requires 3% down. VA and USDA requires 0 down. So we're using down payment assistance to pay the rest of the down payment and help cover the closing costs. So why do down payment programs exist? Where do they get their money, and what's the difference between all these programs? Now, first of all, you'll see these words if you start Googling stuff and finding out what types of down payment assistance programs are out there. What I'll tell you is down payment assistance programs were created to help drive home ownership rates, because the biggest reason why people are unable to purchase a home is that they are not able to come up with enough money to cover their down payment. And that is stopping people from becoming homeowners, because you are spending so much money in rent. You've got your first and last month's security deposit that you paid in rent, that money is tied up. You're living paycheck to paycheck, just paying for rent and all the other expenses out there. And you realize, man, I could buy a house for the same amount I'm paying in rent, but how do I come up with the down payment money? That's why down payment assistance came about. Down payment assistance programs get their money from housing programs. All the programs we're going to talk about today are at a statewide level, and they are housing finance authorities that are given authority by the state of California to provide these programs. And again, the state and the federal government are trying to drive home ownership levels up for well-qualified people that just cannot afford to come up with the down payment money. Now, there are also local down payment assistance programs. I am not going to get into them because they are way too varied, but you can Google your city you're looking to buy in, and most cities and counties have a down payment assistance program. Those are often called GAP programs. A GAP program is literally gap. They cover the gap between what you can afford versus what you're trying to buy. And so when they are looking at, hey, we have GAP program up to $40,000, that doesn't mean you automatically get $40,000. It means, hey, your income says you can qualify for this payment, and to get to that payment, you only need $10,000 of down payment assistance, then that's all we're giving you. So just be aware, a GAP program does not mean you get the full amount of the money. You're only getting a portion of it to bridge the gap between what you need to have in a monthly payment versus what the payment would be on that home. DAP is a down payment assistance program. That's what we're going to be talking about today, is DAP programs. NSP came out 12 years ago. It was part of the last market downturn, and it's called Neighborhood Stabilization Program. The program technically exists, but there's no money for it because we don't need to stabilize neighborhoods because we don't have housing prices dropping like we did 10, 12 years ago. But a neighborhood stabilization program is essentially the government stepping in and buying a blighted home in a neighborhood that is in tough shape, paying to have that home fixed up, and then turning around and selling that home with built-in down payment assistance. And as a matter of fact, with the neighborhood stabilization program, you're not allowed to buy the home unless you meet their low to moderate income requirements, and you have to take their down payment assistance. So that's kind of the big picture on down payment assistance. The other thing I want to talk about before I get into specifics on loans is grants versus not a grant. A lot of people get confused and they call me and say, John, I want as much grant money as I can get. Give me all that free money. Back up the armored truck and unload it in front of my new house. I want my free money. None of it's free. None of the money is free. There are programs that give you grants, but you're paying a higher interest rate on the primary mortgage, on the base mortgage, the FHA, the conventional, the VA, the USDA loan. Your interest rate goes up to offset the fact that they are giving you that money that you don't have to repay. So just be aware that there is no such thing as free money with these programs. The other thing is income limits. I'll tell you what, most people, if they've ever tried to do down payment assistance before, they were really, really worried because they couldn't qualify because they made too much money. There's a lot more flexibility now with the income limits. I'll explain it to you as we go forward, but if you ever had in the past tried to get down payment assistance and you said, oh my gosh, this isn't worth it, I make too much money, we've got a lot of options now that can help you out that don't have limits to how much income that you can earn. The other thing, as a general point, home buyer education is usually required. There's online courses, we'll send you to the right place, but just be aware that when taking advantage of down payment assistance, it's pretty common that you have to do home buyer education. All right, so let's dive in. As I mentioned a little while ago, what is the best down payment assistance program? It's the bank of mom and dad. So we've got to love PowerPoint. They actually found this and automatically put this slide in here for me. So I guess that's dad, mom's somewhere in the background, and there's, what is it, Pumbaa? No, which one's the name of the kid in The Lion King? Anyway, that's the kid in The Lion King, right? So Bank of Mom and Dad, they are the best place to help you get down payment assistance. And if you are looking for help in buying a home, remember, mom and dad don't necessarily have the same financial cost as down payment assistance programs will. You're paying a much higher financial toll because down payment assistance has higher interest rates and higher fees than a normal loan. Now, with the Bank of Mom and Dad, you may not have the financial cost, but you got the emotional cost. So for a lot of people, they just don't want to dip into that well, or they can't because there's no well to dip into. But I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you, always, always, always start with Bank of Mom and Dad because that is the best way to get down payment assistance money, and you often don't have to pay it back. All right, outside of that, I want to dive into the first program we're going to discuss today, and that is CalHFA. CalHFA, so there's three major programs I'm going to talk about today. CalHFA, GSFA Platinum, and GSFA Open Door. So the CalHFA program has two components to it. It's got what they call the My Home program. The My Home program gives you 3% towards your down payments. It loans you 3% towards your down payment on conventional loans, 3.5% towards your down payment on FHA loans, but they cap you at $10,000. But there's one stipulation where you're not capped, and it's a loan that they give you towards down payment and closing costs. Now guys, here's where it's really important to understand. Your down payments can only come from you, from a gift, or from a down payment assistance program. But your closing costs can come from any one of those three areas, but they can also come from the seller, and it can come from the lender. Now, why would the lender give you down payment or give you money to help pay for closing costs? Because I'm an amazing guy? No, I am an amazing guy, but that's not the reason we would do it. It's because we're trading off a higher interest rate to give you money towards your closing costs. Why would the seller give you money to pay for closing costs? Because they might be in a position where they were about ready to lower the price on the home anyway. if you have a great real estate agent, they're going to help you figure out, hey, this house is a really hot home. You're not going to get you're not going to get a seller credit on it. Versus, hey, this house has been on the market for 200 days and they haven't lowered the price yet. I bet if we went to them and said, I'll give you a full price offer, but I want $10,000 towards closing costs, then they might be willing to do it. Okay, so you can get down payment assistance just to cover your down payment, and then use seller credits to pay all your closing costs, and you can get a better deal on the loan, because the more assistance money you get, the higher interest rate you're paying. So you want to focus on how do we get the least amount of assistance to be able to successfully purchase the home. It is not all or nothing. You don't have to go all in and get all the assistance. Just get enough to make it work for what your needs are. All right, so the school and fire department employees are not limited to the $10,000 limit. So that's the only benefit CalHFA offers to people who work for a school, whether you're in a school or administrative offices, charter schools, all different types of schools. CalHFA says, great, we'll give you the 3 or 3.5% without regard to the $10,000 cap. If you're not a school or fire department employee, then you have a cap of $10,000. The second program with CalHFA that's layered on is called the ZIP program. It's called ZIP because your interest that you pay is zip, zilch, zero. You pay no interest on that portion of your down payment assistance money. But guess what? They get it back because they charge you a higher interest rate on your primary mortgage to make up for the fact that you use the ZIP loan. No such thing as free money. Just keep remembering that. The ZIP loan is a 3 or 4% assistance loan with no interest charged at all. There are always going to be higher interest rates charged on the first mortgage with the ZIP program. And just remember, with CalHFA, you have to be a first-time home buyer. The first-time home buyer, now here's what most people don't understand. The definition of first-time home buyer is that you have not owned your primary residence in the last 3 years. So if you owned a home, as a matter of fact, I talked to a lady today that owned a home in Sacramento, and then she moved to San Diego about 5 years ago, and now she moved back up to this area and she wants to buy a home. She has not moved back into that rental. Technically, she's a first-time home buyer. Even though she bought the home in Sacramento in 2007, and she has rented that house out for the last 5 years, because she didn't live there for the last 3 years, she's considered a first-time home buyer. Here's something I learned new today. I learn new things every day, which is that CalHFA also defines the fact that if you reside in a residence owned by your spouse, you are also not considered a first-time home buyer. Now, I don't know if that applies across the board to every program. This is the first time I've ever heard that caveat, but it makes sense. Let me give you a simple scenario. Jane and Bob are getting married, and Bob owns a house, and Bob has lived in his house for the last 5 years. And Jane got married and moved into Bob's house 2 months ago, but they've decided we're going to have a baby and this house is too small. We want to buy a bigger house, but Bob wants to keep his house as a rental property. So Jane says, great, I'll go buy the house in my name because I'm a first-time home buyer. Well, according to CalHFA, Jane, you're not, because you resided in a residence owned by your spouse. So if you are Jane and you're thinking of getting married and your Bob owns a home, don't move in with him if you want to get down payment assistance. But I'd say move in with him if you want to stay married. So what's more important, down payment assistance or getting married? Saying married. I'm just kidding. My point is that there is an issue there I want you to be aware of. All right, CalHFA does have income limits. Now, here's the thing about, thank you, Michelle, for giving me that. So here's the deal with CalHFA's income limits. CalHFA only cares about the income I'm using for qualification. So we can split up borrowers and we can say, okay, so we've got Jane and Bob. And again, forget this, that's a bad example because Jane and Bob's story is the whole, should they live together or not? So let's use Fred and Mary. So you've got Fred and Mary and they both have good jobs and they both make $100,000 a year. I can keep both of them on the loan, but I can pretend that one of them is unemployed because it's not lying to omit income information, but you have to qualify based on only the one person's income. So if we're in a situation and let's say we're buying in, I don't care, Solano County, and the income is $188,000 cap. Well, if each of them make $100,000 and they exceed the $200,000 cap, I can't say, well, then let's just ignore $20,000 of one of their incomes. I can't do that. But what I can do is I can say, let's ignore one person's income. Or if one of the people, one of the parties, is paid in a couple of different ways. Because here's what we look at for income. We look at base, overtime, commission, and bonus. And I can ignore one of those or multiple of those buckets. So let's say that somebody makes $50,000 base and another, $25,000 in bonus and another $25,000 in overtime. Well, then I can ignore portions of that and only use the base. Now, I can't only use the overtime. Like, base is required, but I can ignore the overtime. I can ignore the bonus. So there's ways we can mix and match. We play Tetris with your income. Okay, I grew up playing Tetris on my Atari or Nintendo or whatever the heck it was. I like playing Tetris, and that's kind of what I do for a living now. So CalHFA income limits, there's ways to work around those income limits, but they are hard and fast limits. If you need the income to qualify, and that qualifying income is over these limits, you cannot use down payment assistance. All right, now let's talk about the interest rates. Now, the lawyers are going to say, I got to quote APR. I'm not quoting you a number. I'm just showing you a chart. So this is not the APR, but APR is a bit, I won't call it misleading, but APR includes all of the fees as if they were interest over the life of the loan. But the truth is, you're paying the fees, and then you're paying the interest, which is your note rate, how much interest you pay every year. That's what you're looking at right now, is the interest rates. So you can see, and FHA is the easiest example for me to show you here. If you get a CalHFA FHA loan, you're going to have an interest rate of 2.75%, and you have to combine that with the My Home loan. So you can get a 0 down payment home, and you get a 2.75% interest rate. Your 3.5% down payment is being covered by a loan from CalHFA, and as long as you can cover all the closing costs yourself or get seller credits for the closing costs, and FHA allows us to have the seller pay up to 6% of the purchase price for closing costs. That'll more than cover all the closing costs. So you can't get cash back, by the way, but if you negotiate properly, we can get you into a home with no money out of pocket if you get a big seller credit with a 2.75% interest rate. But if you said, John, I need some help with those closing costs, we can get you the ZIP loan, 2% of the purchase, or 2% of the loan amount, with no interest charged on that 2%, but you're paying an extra 0.25% every year for the next 30 years. They're getting their money back. You can get 1 more percent, but it's another extra 0.25%. So wait a second, that math doesn't make sense. I pay a 0.25% extra for 2% in assistance, and then the same 0.25% I pay again, and it only gives me 1 more percent? Yeah, it's the law of diminishing returns. The more you want, the more it costs you to get that same equivalent amount that you wanted. So this is just a feel for where today's interest rates are for CalHFA. So let me give you some miscellaneous details about CalHFA. They are pretty restrictive on your income to debt ratio. I've got other programs that are more relaxed. As a matter of fact, the Open Door program can go all the way up to 55% of your income towards your bills. CalHFA is going to limit us to 43% of your income. So we got to make sure that we meet all the criteria. They're going to require a 660 credit score if you're doing FHA, 680 if you're doing conventional. Now here's the cool thing. CalHFA is okay with you buying a manufactured home. Now I'm going to time out for a quick second. Manufactured homes are only considered real estate if you are buying the land and the manufactured home is permanently affixed to the land via a permanent foundation, and the permanent foundation and the manufactured home has to be properly recorded. They're the HCD, the Housing and Community Development, I think it is, the HCD, that's the name of the department in Sacramento. They handle recording, issuing of a document called the 433A. You have to make sure there's a 433A recorded in order for a manufactured home to be considered real estate. If it is not, if it's in a park that you're renting, I cannot do the loan at all, and I definitely can't do it with down payment assistance. There are other lenders that can loan money if you're buying a home in a park. So I'm not telling you you can't do that, but these programs and any of my programs do not count for manufactured homes that are in a park. And a manufactured home that's just placed on land but not permanently secured and not recorded correctly with the county via the 433A cannot get real estate lending. Condominiums are okay too. Be careful with condominiums because condominiums have additional restrictions from FHA, conventional VA, and USDA. They have certain criteria about whether the health of the condominium association meets their requirements. Not all condominiums are lendable. As a matter of fact, the condominiums that aren't lendable are cheaper than the ones that are, because the only buyers who can buy the condominiums that are in projects that are not well financially managed, the only buyers that can buy them are cash buyers, and they have to keep the prices low to attract the cash buyers. So if you find 2 different condos in town in 2 different projects and they look the same, and you're saying, well, why in the world is this one selling for $50,000 less than this one? Clearly, I'd like the $50,000 cheaper one. Well, that difference likely is the $50,000 cheaper one does not meet the requirements for lending in the project, or the project doesn't meet requirements for lending, and therefore you cannot buy that cheaper one. I'm not telling you that, I'm not saying 100% that's why, but most of the time it is. If it's exactly the same home and exactly the same amenities and exactly the same town, then the difference between the cheap condo and the expensive condo is the cheap condo you got to pay cash. All right, CalHFA does not let us use a mortgage credit certificate to qualify. I'll explain at the end what a mortgage credit certificate is. CalHFA uses Fannie Mae's guidelines only. That was what I said earlier. Conventional loans, you got Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and each of them only use one or the other, and the recipe that I use to say you're qualified is different between the two. Here's another piece. CalHFA requires a 1-year home warranty. Your realtor will help you negotiate that. You can pay for it, the seller can pay for it, but just be aware that a 1-year home warranty is 100% required. All right, and now let's talk about some numbers with CalHFA. So here's an example with FHA. You've got FHA financing, 96.5% of the purchase price. My Home is your down payment money. So you have 0 down payment. You can use a ZIP loan for up to 4% of the first mortgage amount to cover closing costs. Remember, closing costs are higher than normal on any down payment assistance loan, but that means you have almost no cash needed to close. In a lot of circumstances, we can get you in with as little as $1,000 to $2,000 at most, and we don't need seller credits. That helps make you more attractive to the seller. In the highly competitive market that we're in right now, if you can get away with not asking for seller credits, you're going to be more successful in getting an offer accepted. Okay, we can use seller credits. Don't misunderstand me, but it is going to harm your ability to get your offer accepted. Doesn't matter if I can approve you or not. If you can't get a seller to say yes to your offer, you are not buying anything. So this is where we're trying to figure out a way to get you the maximum amount of credits without having to ask the seller for help. All right, now let's do the conventional example. Basically the same thing. Conventional, you borrow 97%. The My Home program gives you 3%. That's 0 down. Then you get the ZIP loan as a third mortgage. Guys, you're getting 3 loans. Now I'm going to stop for a second and explain, when you are using down payment assistance and you are borrowing money for the assistance, the money that you're borrowing gets paid back when you sell the home, when you refinance the home, or in 30 years when you finish paying off the primary mortgage, you got to pay off the down payment assistance. And you might be thinking, John, how in the world am I going to pay off that down payment assistance when I hit the 30-year mark? Well, you owe nothing on your house anymore on your primary mortgage, so you can come back to me in 30 years. I'll only be 40 years old. Maybe the math was wrong there. Anyway, I was trying to make it funny, but that would make me 10 right now, and that would be kind of weird. Anyway, so you could borrow the money again 30 years from now. You're not borrowing it all over again. You're borrowing just a down payment assistance loan. I've run the numbers in the past. If you kept making the mortgage payment you're making today on the primary mortgage, in the 30th year, it takes about 2 years after that of making that payment to finish paying off the down payment assistance money. Really, really simple. Here's the truth. Most of the time, this is a first home that people are buying when they're using down payment assistance. People rarely keep their first home for more than 5 to 7 years. They just don't keep it for 30 years. So the question is, if your decision, do I buy a home or not buy a home, is predicated on, well, I don't want to buy a home because I'm going to owe this down payment assistance money back later, that means you're never going to get the appreciation in equity that comes with home ownership. You're paying off somebody else's mortgage because you didn't want to owe that money back later. Well, if you can buy a home without needing help with down payment assistance, do it by all means, it's a better deal. But when it comes to buying a home, it is your single biggest return on investment because you're using leveraged money. Especially with down payment assistance, you're coming up with next to nothing out of pocket. And over time, homes in California appreciate between 3 and 6% per year on average. You put nothing or very little out of pocket, and you've got a $300,000 or $400,000 asset. 3% of $300,000 is $9,000 a year. It is growing by an average of $9,000 a year, and when you sell it, if you've lived, as long as the IRS hasn't changed the rules, I am not a tax advisor, I cannot give tax advice, but here I go. The IRS says if you sell your primary home that you have resided in for 3 of the last 5 years, you can make as much as $250,000 for one person or as much as $500,000 for a married couple, and you don't pay any taxes on that gain. So you are earning $9,000 in average additional equity every single year, and you can have as much as $250,000 to $500,000 of that increased equity tax-free. You cannot get that anywhere else. That's why buying a home, even with down payment assistance, even paying a higher interest rate, even paying extra fees on the down payment assistance loan, it is way better than not buying a home. And I don't want you worried about, oh my gosh, John, what if we're at the top of the market and prices are going to start going down from here? Here's the deal. I don't think we're anywhere near the top of the market. But even if I had the chance, by the way, I think prices are going to keep going up through probably 2025 or 2026 because we've got a huge population of people that are in their early 30s that 10 years ago graduated from college and went back home to live with mom and dad. And now they're finally realizing, hey, wait a second, maybe I want to have a family. Maybe I want to live on my own and not raise my family in mom and dad's basement. So they are now going out and buying in droves. That's going to keep driving up the housing prices for around the next 5 years. But even if I thought housing prices were going to drop right now, this is a long-term buy. If I could go back to 2008 and buy another home again, I would do it in a heartbeat. Because if you didn't buy a home back in 2008, you know that rent rates kept going up and up and up. And you have paid more and more renting than you ever would have paid if you would have locked in a fixed rate back in 2008. And prices are back to the same place they were back in 2008, but you've had 12 years of making mortgage payments that are lowering your balance. You got a tax write-off you wouldn't have gotten. So buying a home, even if you think it's at the peak of the market, is still a good idea. And I don't think we're anywhere near the peak of the market. All right, same thing with the conventional loan. You can buy with no seller credits if we use the maximum, but again, the interest rates are higher with the more money that you're getting. So it's a trade-off. CalHFA summary, best for first-time home buyers because you have to be a first-time home buyer, and you can get all the funds you need without having to negotiate seller credits. Now let's talk about the GSFA Platinum program. It's grant money, or maybe it's just forgivable money that you don't have to pay back until, well, that you will get forgiven over time. So I'll explain to you what that means. No matter what, as long as you keep the home for at least 3 years and keep the loan for at least 3 years, you do not have to repay the funds. Rates are higher on the primary mortgage. We've talked about that. It is not free money. You do not need to be a first-time home buyer. Even if you own your home right now, you can buy. Now, you cannot own another home. You have to sell your home. But you can buy using the Platinum program, and you do not have to be a first-time home buyer. And you can use a mortgage credit certificate to qualify. Again, I'll talk at the end about what a mortgage credit certificate is. It's available with all of them, FHA, conventional, USDA, and VA. So here's how it works. For most people, it's not a grant. It's a forgivable second mortgage. So whatever money you're getting is a loan, but they forgive the loan in 1/3 increments for the first 3 years. So at the end of 3 years, you don't owe anything on the down payment assistance money that you had borrowed. If you sell or refinance before the end of 3 years, you're prorated based on how many months it's been. So if you sell the house in a year and a half, then you have to pay back half of the down payment assistance money. And there's no interest on the money that you're borrowing, and there's no payments required at all. Here's where you don't have to worry about the 3 years. Remember I said it's for most people, it's a forgivable loan. But if you qualify under the Platinum Select program, it is a gift immediately, and you could sell the house, refinance anything you want without having to pay it back. And there's a couple of criteria. If you're doing a USDA loan or an FHA energy efficient mortgage loan as your primary mortgage, then the down payment assistance money you're getting is forgiven immediately. It's also forgiven immediately on conventional and FHA and VA loans if you are a medical or healthcare worker, peace officer, et cetera, firefighter, et cetera, or a member of CalSTRS, basically in the teaching academic world. So a lot of people have the opportunity to take advantage of this program, and they don't ever have to pay the money back, even if they sell or refinance before the end of 3 years. So the Platinum Select program says the assistance money is forgiven immediately. If you're not in the Select program, then it's forgiven in 1/3 increments every year for the first 3 years. Here's the details. You can go up to a $510,000 loan amount. You cannot do manufactured homes. 640 is the minimum credit score for everything except FHA, and I've got to have a 660 for FHA. We are capped at 45% of your debt to income ratio. If you have a score over 680, under 680, if you're over 680, we can go to 50%. Again, I don't expect you to remember these details, but I want you to understand the differences. CalHFA restricts us to 43% of your income for your debts. GSFA Platinum goes to 45 and sometimes goes to 50. And GSFA uses Freddie Mac's rules. CalHFA uses Fannie Mae's rules. What do those rules matter to you? They don't. They matter to me, but there's times when I'm going to tell you you don't qualify based on Fannie Mae's rules. You have to go Freddie Mac. And the biggest difference is if you have student loans. And I'll explain it in the end what I mean. Now, here's the deal with the income limits for the Platinum program. There are no income limits for FHA, nor are there income limits for conventional. The only income limit for conventional is they give you a better deal if you are under these income thresholds. So I used a sampling of counties, and if you're under those thresholds and you qualify for the conventional loan, then you can get an even better interest rate if you're below these income thresholds. But these are pretty low income thresholds. I mean, we're looking at Sacramento, you got to make under $67,000. So that's a pretty low threshold, but if you are buying a home and you're under that threshold of income, then you can use down payment assistance, and if it's a conventional loan through the Platinum program, you actually get cheaper interest rates. Here's their interest rates, and I'm not showing the cheaper rates here. So they're giving you a 3% rate on FHA, VA, and USDA. You can get a 4% assistance money for a 3% rate. But if you want to go 1% higher, it's a huge jump. Remember when I was talking about CalHFA, you can get the extra 2% and it's a 1/4% higher to go 1% more. This is a big, big jump to go 1% more. These numbers change all the time. I'm an expert in these numbers and I'll help guide you. The difference between the programs sometimes comes down to how much assistance you need and what it's going to cost you to get that assistance. But the rates are super, super good right now because the market is super crazy low, but your rates start moving up pretty quickly the more assistance money that you're trying to get. All right, so again, the numbers are simple. Same thing as the CalHFA program. For the sake of time, I'm going to go pretty quick through this part. Again, almost no cash to close. We typically do need a seller credit on the Platinum program because the grant covers your down payment and very little of your closing costs. So unless you're coming up with money out of your pocket or from Bank of Mom and Dad, we do have to get seller credits in order to keep your cash to close really low. Conventional, there's some options with mortgage insurance we can play with. I'm not going to get too much into the details on that, but the bottom line is that if you have really good credit, like a 760 or better credit score, a conventional down payment assistance loan is absolutely the way to go because the mortgage insurance is significantly cheaper. All right, so here's the numbers on the Platinum program. Again, for the conventional option, you're looking at essentially still needing a seller credit in order to come up with minimal money out of pocket. So Platinum summary, best for people who are not first-time home buyers. You don't have to repay the funds as long as you stay for 3 years. But if you want zero funds to close, you got to get a seller credit, and that'll make it harder to get your offer accepted. All right, so let's go to the last program. I got a lot to cover and 10 minutes left to do it. The GSFA Open Door program is a hybrid. It's a hybrid of a loan and a gift. So they are giving you a 2% loan. That 2% is the dollar amount of the loan. So if you're buying a $400,000 home, you're getting an $8,000 loan if you're doing FHA. They're giving you a 3.5% loan if you're doing conventional. But here's the cool thing. there is no interest charged on the loan portion of the money. And on top of the loan, they're giving you a gift. The gift money never ever has to get repaid no matter how quickly you refinance. And that gift is anywhere from 0 to 4.5% of the purchase price. Actually, it's technically of the loan amount. So again, the rate on the primary mortgage is higher based on the size of the gift. So let me explain this to you, give you some details. Open door, we can go down to a 640 on FHA. Now here was the interesting thing. The Platinum program said you could go to 640 on conventional, but you need 660 on FHA. Here it's kind of the opposite. FHA has the lower threshold at 640. Conventional requires 680. Just keep in your mind, pretty much the current minimum for down payment assistance is a 640 credit score. Open door does not allow manufactured homes, but condos are okay. You cannot use a non-occupant co-borrower on FHA, but you can on conventional. Non-occupant co-borrowers are your mom and dad, your sister, your cousin that aren't living with you, but you need their help in order to qualify for the income necessary to buy the home. So if you have good credit, but you don't have enough income to qualify to make the payment, maybe you have a side job that I can't count, you can use a non-occupant co-borrower. We take your income and their income and combine them together. We take your bills, including a new house payment, their bills, including the house where they live, we combine them together, and as long as everybody can afford together to pay for all of the debt, you're qualified. So that's a great way to help people who they can afford the payment, but they don't show enough income to show that they can afford it. Income limits, same thing as the Platinum program. They have no income limits for FHA or conventional, but there are better rates for conventional loans if you're below 80% of the area median income. Here's the most confusing chart of the day. This is the rates on the open door program. I'm going to point out here, this is a government loan. So it's an FHA loan. You have to have a credit score of over 680 and spending less than 45% of your income towards your bills. You can get 3% in assistance for a 2.75% interest rate. Remember, CalHFA gave you 3.5% at a 2.75 rate, but you had to pay back all of the 3.5%. The open door program says for that same interest rate, I'm going to give you a gift of 1%, and the other 2% you pay back with no interest at all. But here's the deal, rates can go as high as 4.75. But you can get as much as 6.5% between the second mortgage of 2%, no interest is charged on any of the second mortgages, and up to 4.5% of your purchase price, your loan amount, that never has to get paid back. It's a gift, and you're just paying a significantly higher interest rate for that. So there's a sweet spot. Like right here, the 3.625 is a sweet spot. You get 5.5% total down payment assistance for a 3.625 rate. I'm not a fan of you getting only 1% extra in assistance because you got to pay more than 1% extra every single year. It is not good financial sense to spend 1% extra every year for a one-time bump of 1% in upfront money. So that's just a sample of how the rates work on the open door program. Again, on a conventional loan, theoretically, it could be as high as 5.625% to get the full amount of down payment assistance. But if you're below 80% of the area median income, you can get that same full amount of assistance for a rate of 4.3. So there's some really attractive loopholes that I can help work through with you on this program. Again, guys, the numbers are pretty much the same. I apologize for going that quick, but essentially it is gift money. You're getting your grant money and your down payment assistance. And best case, you do need some seller credits depending upon how much you're getting in assistance. You can use the open door program, max out the interest rate that allows you to purchase the home, because the open door program lets me go up to 55% of your income towards your bills. So there's a lot more flexibility to get assistance without needing seller credits. Same thing with conventional, so I'll speed through this part of it because I want to get to the side-by-side examples. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. This is, what do you get at 3% interest rate? So the first column says, how much do you get in grant money? The second column is how much you get in loan money. And then the third column is how do you have to pay it back? So this all assumes a 680 credit score and a 3% interest rate. So CalHFA would give you $16,000, but you got to pay it all back. And the first $10,000 you pay back at a 3.5% interest rate. You never make any payments. You just pay it back. And so that money at the rate, the part of the money that is being charged interest grows every year. So you will owe more at the end of the term. That's CalHFA giving you $16,000, but you got to pay it all back. Platinum at the exact same 3% interest rate gives you $12,000, and you don't ever have to pay it back as long as you're either part of the select program or meet their criteria, or you are waiting at least 3 years. You never have to pay back that 12 grand. The open door program at the 3% rate gives you the same 12 grand, but part of it has to get paid back. So if 12 grand's enough money for you to get into the home, Platinum program is 100% the way to go. But here's a different example. This is showing the maximum amount of money that you can get. So CalHFA can give you a maximum of $19,000, and it's at a pretty decent rate of 3.25. The Platinum program caps out at $15,000 for the 300. This is all based on the same $300,000 loan on the example before. I forgot to put that in my disclaimers. So on a $300,000 home, Platinum caps out at $15,000, and you're paying a lot higher rate for that. So you're getting less money. You're paying more in interest on your primary mortgage for the less money, but you never have to pay that money back. This, you get a better rate and payment, but you gotta pay it back. Open door is a good combination of both. You're actually getting almost $20,000, and you only have to pay $6,000 of it back. But your rate is 4.75%. So you can see where the CalHFA program typically gives you the most money available for the lowest monthly payment, but you have to pay that money back. All right, so now I want to switch to talking about what is a mortgage credit certificate. Again, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to post them either on Facebook Live or on the Zoom chat, and I'll try and get to them. I'm going to wrap this up in the next 3 minutes, but I'll stick around for questions afterwards. So what is a mortgage credit certificate? It is a tool that I use to give you two benefits. It gives you a better tax write-off, and it helps us qualify for a higher loan amount. There are income limits for the mortgage credit certificate program, and they take into account income for everybody that's living in the household. But what it does is it converts 20% of your mortgage interest every year from a tax deduction to a tax credit. As an example, if you bought a $300,000 home at a 3% interest rate, it would save you $1,800 in the first year. There's only 2 zeros, $1,800 in the first year, because you get a tax credit instead of a tax deduction. I won't take the time right now to explain the difference, but it's better, okay? There is an additional fee. It costs about $750, but here's the cool thing. I get to add the additional money. So this $1,800 a year is $150 a month that I get to add to your income for the purpose of qualifying you. So if I have somebody who's maybe got turned down by another lender because they bought a home at a particular price and it just exceeded what they could qualify for, the mortgage credit certificate's a great tool that I use if they qualify for it. You do have to be a first-time home buyer, and it helps me to qualify you for a higher loan amount, and it gives you a benefit of getting additional money back on your taxes. There is a recapture tax, so the IRS says, hey, if you sell the house within 5 years or at the 5-year mark, let me rephrase that, you sell the house anytime in 10 years, you might have to pay back some of the tax savings that you got. The 5-year mark is the worst, so it's kind of a peak here. If you sell it in the beginning or you sell it in the end of the 10-year time frame, it's a very little recapture amount. If you sell it in the 5th year, it's the highest amount. Again, if you have questions, I can go through that in further detail one-on-one. Here's the biggest thing. This is the last thing I want to cover. I'm perfect on time. It's 6:29. So when you are looking at, gosh, John, you're talking about the whole difference between Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and why does that matter? And I told you earlier, student loans. Student loans are the reason it matters, because student loan debt has ballooned in this country, and it is the #1 challenge I run into in qualifying people for a mortgage. For the longest time, my industry did not know how to treat student loans. We've now gotten them pretty clear, but each entity treats them a little bit different. If you have student loans that you are making a payment on, it might be an income-based repayment plan. Therefore, it's a very low payment. Sometimes I had somebody who had $350,000 in student loans and their payment was $25 a month. Yeah, really, it was. So that person, we want to go Fannie Mae, because Fannie Mae says, if you are making a payment, I'll count whatever the payment is. As long as you're making a payment, that's what I'm going to count. So Fannie Mae is the way to go. The problem is CalHFA is the only program that uses Fannie Mae. So if you're not making a payment, Fannie Mae, like it's deferred, whatever, you're not on a payment plan yet, Fannie Mae says you have to count 1% of your payment if you're not making a payment. 1% of your balance if you're not making a payment. If you are not making a payment, then your better option is to go with Freddie Mac, because Freddie Mac says, hey, I got to count at least 0.5% of your balance as your monthly payment. So again, a lot of moving parts here, but very simply, I might say, hey, because of your student loans, we've got to go this direction, and this direction means we have to go with this down payment assistance, and we can't go with the other one. There's a lot of nuances there, but the bottom line is that's where I'm an expert to help guide you down the road in order to successfully become a homeowner and start gaining the benefits of owning your own home. So if you have any questions, guys, feel free to chat them up right now. Appreciate you listening. Don't forget, check out my video library. I've got all of my webinars I do on YouTube. So you can go to youtube.com/JohnLoneKing and you can see all of my stuff. It's absolutely amazing. I hired a professional actor. No, it's just me, but you'll love it anyway. All right, guys, thank you very much. I'll hang out for a quick minute in case anybody has any questions. Otherwise, thanks for attending and good night.